Baruch haba lekulam. Thank you for coming in again. And we have a really very interesting Parshanut shir today. Okay? I'll tell you, Reb Yaakov used to give this shir to people who wanted to be teachers. Torah Masorah used to produce teachers. So Reb Yaakov used to give shurim on the topic of Parshanut in Tanach. Okay? This piece could either be done in Chumash, it's going to be done on Sefer Ruth, but it could be done in a lot of different places. Sefer Ruth is a good place because it answers up a question that Reb Yaakov has at the end of Sefer Ruth. But the Yesod over here is that he viewed this as a classic example of how Reb Yaakov learns up Parshanut. He has a few different ones. I don't remember all of them, but he has a few different ones that he used to give to potential teachers. Okay, so this is one of them. There's two parts to this. In the middle are the two parts, meaning it's not two parts like part one and part two. Part one and part two are together, but I'm going to make sure this week we're only going to do part one, and therefore in the middle we're going to be skipping a little, and next week we'll do part two. Part two is an unbelievable pshat that Reb Yaakov says. It's such a chiddush, I don't know what to do with it, but I won't reveal it yet. Next week we'll talk about it more. So in order to make this clear, everybody received their the sources?
Yes.
Okay. So in order to make it clear, I'm going to wherever I underlined. Hold on one second. There's going to be an underline for a beginning. 1 second. Yeah. On page 5, okay, that's where Reb Yaakov starts, page 5. You see it's underlined on top over the Vahainu? You hear that?
Yes.
Okay. So when it's underlined, that's where we start. And then when it's underlined again, we stop and then skip to the next underline. Okay? And next week, you'll understand why I did this. Okay? You won't understand it this week, but you'll understand it next week. Okay. So Reb Yaakov is talking here in Sefer Ruth on the last parsha of Sefer Ruth. At the end over there, it says, chapter 4, Pasuk Tetzayin, I underlined it, Vatikach nomi et hayeled vatishitehu b'cheika vatehi lo la'omenet. Right? Nomi took the child that Ruth bore, and she placed it in her bosom, and she was for the child, right? Oved, a omenet, either a nurse or a stepmom. Vatikrena lo ashchedo shem lemar yulad ben lenomi. And the shchenot called the name, saying, in other words, what they said was Yulad ben lenomi, vatikrena shmo oved, and hu avi Yisha avi David, right? And the neighbors, right, said that Nomi bore a child, right? And they named him Oved, okay? Which is very interesting in itself that the baby is named by the Shechinot, not by Ruth and not by Nomi, okay? But it does say over here, Yulad ben Lenomi, okay? And Reb Yaakov really wants to know, what does that really mean, Yulad ben Lenomi? Obviously, Nomi didn't Yulad this ben. So in what sense is she Yulad this ben? Okay, so we'll talk about Yivam and stuff like this, but Reb Yaakov was going to make really very deep sense about this, okay? It's not just that, Ruth married Boaz, and Boaz related to Machlon, and therefore now it's like Machlon, this child is in place of Machlon, right? There's something really more over here. So Rabbi Yaakov begins like this: V'hainu, b'bira inyan nira, ubehegdem tzarich levar parsha tmua b'sefer Bereshis. That is, that this in understanding this matter in Ruth, it seems to Reb Yaakov, and I have to proceed by understanding, or not understanding, but explaining a very difficult parsha to Mu'ah in Sefer Bereshis. Hinei be'emtza sipa korotav shel Yosef, v'sipa hishtal shalus yuridat avotenu l'Mitzrayim. In the middle of the Sipar Korosov Shel Yosef, what happened to Yosef, right? That he got sold, right? And that he was sold to Egypt, and that brought everybody down to Egypt. That was the chain, right? Reaction, so to speak, right? One led to the other thing. Yosef was in Egypt. He became the second in command. That brought the Jews down because there was a famine, right? And that's how it all started. Yeshla parsha shekol kulo sekes biYehudo mishpachto v'nenu shayechet l'mahalach ha'Iruim klal. There is a parsha that is completely involved in Yehuda and his family, v'nenu shayechet l'mahalach ha'Iruim klal, and it's not really shayech to anything going on here. Rak v'rak kotas es retzev hadvarim. It only cuts off the sequence of the matters, right? What does it say? It says, if we go to page 2, right? Go back to page 2. Vayehi be'esahi. So what did it say right before that? V'amidanim machru to el Mitzrayim lepotifar sris paro sarat habachim. Right? The midanim, right, sold him, Yosef, to Potiphar. Okay, Sarat Habachim. Okay, then if you go, then's the parsha of Yehuda and Tamar. If you skip to page 3, right, at the end of this parsha, where there's a stuma here, now it goes to Kapitel Lametes, V'Yosef hu rad Mitzrayma v'yikneu Potiphar sris paro. It repeats the idea again. You hear when it ended with, it repeats. Why? Because the thing in the middle is a parenthetic statement. There was something else that happened at this time, right? But really, if you take out that whole story with Yehuda, right, the story flows, right? He was sold to the Sarah Tabachim, right? He was brought down to Mitzrayim, and he was a Ish Matzliach. Right, so Reb Yaakov basically is saying here that this is a parsha of Yehuda just cuts off the sequence. That's all it seems to be doing. It's very strange. Okay, so Reb Yaakov comes up with 2 possible answers. Okay, the first one, he uses a medrash and tries to force it into the pshat here. Right? But he's not going to like it. And the second one, the Medrash is actually raising this question and answering it. I do want to point out, and I'm not sure why Reb Yaakov doesn't point it out, is that Rashi asks this question, right? It says, Vayihi ba'esahi, lo manismucha parsha zu lekan. I'm just reading Baal Peh. Just listen, Baal Peh. Why is this parsha brought over here? Ve'ifsik b'parsha shel Yosef. The question, it stops the parsha, the retzef of the parsha of Yosef, that his brothers took down his I wouldn't say his greatness, but what?
His stature.
His stature. That's a good word. Took down his stature. Okay, when they saw how Yaakov reacted to the death, quote unquote, of Yosef. Amru, Ata amarta lemochro, ilu amarta lo shivo, hayinu shomim lecha. Right? So Rashi says that's what it's coming to tell me, that the brothers were angry at him, right? And therefore they took him down. They took down Yehuda from his stature, right? And he went down, right? And the truth is, according to Rashi, the parsha really can make a lot of sense because Yehuda does certain things in this parsha that show like that he lost a little bit of stature, right? That he lost a little bit of the stature when he did this. Like, in other words, he said, listen, my brothers did this, so now I'm not the same person I really was, and therefore things happen in this parsha. You can learn Rashi. For some reason, Reb Yaakov doesn't bring it. He brings the Medrash. Okay, but let's take a look. He brings two Medrashim. One that doesn't ask the question. That's the first one. But Reb Yaakov tries to figure out it might be an answer using this Medrash, but Reb Yaakov rejects it. The second one clearly raises the question and gives an answer. And Reb Yaakov has a lot to say about that Medrash. But most of this article is Parshanut in the text without the Medrash. Okay, so let's take a look at the Medrash.
So we're going on page 4 now?
We're on page where we just started.
5.
Was it page 4? Yes.
Page 5.
Right?
Page 5.
Page 5. Okay, we were on page 5,
Okay.
right? So it says Varak Kotas es Retzef Advar. Omnan Yesh B'Medrash. Does everybody see this? It's about 6-7 lines from where I started to read. Omnan. But or for sure, Yesh B'Medrash. Bereshis Rabbah, Parshas Vayesha, Parsha Pei Zayin Vav, Matrona Shola et Reb Yossi. I don't know if you guys ever heard this. It's an interesting medrash unto itself. It's something to really talk about. Okay, the Matrona. What's a Matrona? A matron. A matron is a I don't know, a princess. It's probably what?
Classy lady.
Classy lady. That's a good way of putting it. And I have a feeling we're talking about a Roman classy lady. Matrona Sholet Reb Yossi, Amrlo, she said to him, Efsher Yosef ben Shvas Shona Haya Omed B'chol Chum'o. Is it possible Yosef is 17 years old and he stands with all his heat, meaning his libido is so strong, V'haya Osa Davar Azeh, and you think I believe that he ran out of the house when she tried to seduce him? What are you kidding me? That's what the matron wants to say.
But he wasn't 17. He wasn't 17 then. He was much older.
Well, let's say he was older than that. How old was he?
He was older. I mean, he went to prison and he went out. He was in.
No, this is before prison.
Hasn't gone to prison yet.
Hasn't gone to prison yet.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Like
You're
his
right.
first week there. His first week.
He's been working, let's say, for a few years. But the man is like, either he's not in his teens anymore, but he's nice and young.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
She's not seducing an old geezer, right? Right? So she doesn't believe it. So Reb Yaakov adds something here, a real shtoch to the woman. Mipnei shehi kira heitiv she'etzlam, by the people that this matron belonged to, right? Hakadoshim and kadeshim, the holy ones are prostitutes, right? It's like Rabbi Yaakov knew that in the Catholic world, the priests and the nuns, they're not as holy as we make them out to be, right? That's why she was positive. Right? I know this can't be. If I would seduce one of my people, he would get seduced pretty easily. Right? For Kosuf Shabamedrash, Reb Yossi Hira La B'Sefer Torah Sheyesh Tshuva B'Tzido. That Reb Yossi showed her opened up a Sefer Torah. And he showed her an answer right there, right next to it, right next to where the parsha of Yosef is. He showed her an answer to her question. But the pasuk does not try to cover up for Yehuda. Yehuda goes after a prostitute. Now you want to make Yehuda look good. Don't forget he is the father of Malchus based David, right? So you know what? You could skip over this story a little bit, right? But no, the Torah says that he went and he saw there was a prostitute. And of course, the yeshiva world, kvetches that, there was the Eitzara was extra strong here. And, he was there to do something. So the yeshiva, Reb Yaakov doesn't buy into that. And neither does this Medrash, by the way. The Medrash says that that Yehuda did something that doesn't look so good, right? I have to tell you that the Rambam already writes, right? In Ilchos Ishus, if I'm not mistaken, the Rambam writes clearly that sleeping with a prostitute before Matan Torah was mutter. Again, I don't know if you gave a person shlishi on Shabbos after he did that, but it was mutter. Okay, to do that, the Rambam says it clearly. Who wrote sefer? He wrote out. It's also to marry to sleep with a married woman in those days or rape a woman. That was not permitted. But if he wants and she wants, so you're allowed to do that.
Wait, you're allowed to pay for it too?
You're allowed to pay for it. There was no isser of zona here, of matnas zona. There was no matan zona. There was no isser here. But that's what the Rambam writes. The pasuk doesn't cover up. By the way, Reb Yaakov doesn't quote the other thing. That's why I photocopied the Medrash. If you want to see the Medrash, there it says, and he also showed her the story of Ruvain and Bilhah. Right? It says that in the Medrash too. Right? Which, of course, Chazal say that it doesn't really mean that. Right? But he shows her what it says in the text. Torah doesn't cover up. So he says like this. Right? In other words, the text says over there, the Medrash says over there that if it's showing you what Yehuda did and what Reuven did, and they're in their father's rishus, right? They're much older in their father's rishus. Certainly Yosef, who's an Eved in Mitzrayim, if he's nichshel in an Ashes Ish, right? If he's nichshel in Ashes Ish, it's understandable. What is he supposed to do? He's all alone in Egypt. He's being threatened by her, right? So, of course, he's going to sleep with her, right? So that's the way he puts it. You think the Torah would cover up? It wouldn't look so bad if Yosef did that. And yet, it tells you that he ran out. Al karchach, that he really did run out. Okay? So what does he say over here? This alone can't be a reason why the parsha was written. So Reb Yaakov wants that. Yaakov's thinking that the Medrash, according to this Medrash, I can answer the question. He has a havamina. What does it mean? I'm contrasting you with Yosef. I'm contrasting Yehuda with Yosef. Yehuda's wife dies, right? And he gets an urge and he sleeps with a prostitute. And Yosef, whose libido is quite strong, and he is an Eved in Egypt and being threatened by a matrona, right? A matron, right? And he doesn't give in. So that's the contrast. So Rabbi Yaakov says he doesn't believe that that's why the parsha would have been written. Okay? That he rejects that.
Because
okay?
the Torah, why not? Because the Torah wouldn't bother to just provide this answer to this for this goyish question.
Yeah. In other words, it wouldn't really right. It wouldn't really write this whole story. Rebecca's going to speak it. It's a long story of Yehuda, like to just tell us that he's different than Yosef. By the way, it could have just said he slept with a prostitute, right? It didn't have to have this whole long story. That would have already been the contrast. Ukfar tiritz Chazal b'Bereishis Rabbah. Chazal asked this question that Rashi asks, and they give a different answer, a very yesodi answer, right? Which is a very well-known medrash. Probably some of you know it, right? Parsha Hey, Siman Aleph. Here, Parsha Pei Hey, Siman Aleph. Reb Shmuel Bar Nachman Patach. Shmuel Nachman opened up his drasha. Shvatim hayu asukim b'mechirasa shel Yosef. The Shvatim were involved in selling Yosef. For Yosef hayu asuk b'sako v'tanisa. And Yosef was involved in mourning and fasting, meaning he was the object, right, or the subject of the object of the sale. So he was, of course, praying to Hashem. It doesn't happen. Ruvain hayu asuk b'sako v'tanisa. Ruvain, it says actually, when he went to the bar and he saw Yosef wasn't in the bar, for Yikras Bagadav, he rent his garments, right? he's also right in the Medrash. If I'm not mistaken, it also says Yaakov hayosik be sako bataniso. Okay, v'Hakadosh Baruch Hu osik borei oro shel melech hamashiach, and right, God is involved in what? In creating the first light of Mashiach. Right, the first light of the brightness of Mashiach. Okay, so this medrash onto itself is a gavaltic medrash, but let's go through and see what Reb Yaakov says. Then we'll go back to it. Vayihi be'etahid, this is still the medrash. Vayir Yehuda beterem tochil yalada, before the labor pains she birthed. What does this mean in Yeshaya? Kodem shen lo nolad meshabed rishon, before the first oppressor was born. Who's the first oppressor? Paro. He oppressed the Jewish people. Nola Goel Achron. The last Goel, meaning the final Goel, Mashiach, was born. Ayin Sham Dahainu, Shel Parshasu Mesupara Leidus Peretz, Shu Avia Shosheles, Shel David HaMelech, HaKosuv Kam B'Sof HaMegillah. Right? At the end of the Megillah, it says, right, the Eila told us Peretz. That's the way the Megillah ends. So he's the beginning of the Shalshelas of David HaMelech, right? V'zeh nikra brias oro shel Mashiach. This is called brias oro because it's not Mashiach yet, and it's not even Malchus Beis David. It's the source or the small seed that's planted. V'kamakomo kivin shekam aschila golut sheyahayehudi arishon Yosef Yered Mitzrayimah. Uvadinu shakadosh baruch hu yivra oro shel Mashiach. Right? In other words, when Yosef is going down to Egypt, what does that mean? He's the first Jew to go down to Egypt and first Jew in Galut. This is the beginning of the Galut, right? Mamish, the beginning. We always say the beginning of Galut is when the Shvatim go down and they get comfortable. No. Yosef goes down. This is the beginning of the Galut. That's the seed of the Galut. So therefore, Mida keneged Mida, right? Shakadosh Baruch Hu yivra oro shel Mashiach. He should create at this point the seed of Mashiach, meaning he creates the refuah before the Makkah. And that's this whole parsha in the middle, right? To tell me that Yosef's going down to Egypt, stop. He's the first of the Meshubadim in Egypt. He's the first Eved in Egypt, the first seed of Galut, right? So now the first seed of Mashiach has to be born in order to counteract that. Okay, it's a very beautiful medrash on itself. And by the way, Reb Yaakov used to, certain medrashim. I remember Soloveitchik, Reb Yaakov, others as well. The Alter Slabuk. I think I mentioned this. They used to beat certain midrashim to death. Okay, this is one of the ones that Reb Yaakov used to beat to death. Right? I told you there's another one in Mirshanu Kamalachim Anu Kibnei Adam. That one Reb Yaakov beat to death like you wouldn't believe. I remember it publicly hearing it and different pshatim in it like 20 different times. Okay, here Reb Yaakov. I'm going to give this parenthetically. I don't know if it's in the Sefer or not, but Reb Yaakov used to use it. Reb Yaakov used to say like this. Take a look what the Medrash is saying. Ruvain is involved in Sako Vespedo. The brothers are involved in selling, right? Yaakov is involved in mourning. Yosef's involved in mourning. And God is involved in creating Mashiach. What is the Medrash in itself trying to say over here? Before the Medrash gives us the parshanut, why it's here, what's the Medrash trying to say? So Reb Yaakov said, this Medrash is a yesod and how Mashiach's going to come. Mashiach's not going to come, right? When you're looking for him. Everybody's going to be involved in their lives, right? When you're ready to accept Mashiach, he's not going to come. He's going to come when it's least expected, right? You don't expect him to come. That's what it means over here, that everyone's involved in their daily lives. This one is doing business with Yosef. This one is mourning, right? And God is creating the Or Shel, meaning nobody knows about it. Nobody knows he's creating the Or Mashiach. This has to do with Yehuda. like nobody, So that's what he says. When it's least expected, that's gonna happen. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, Reb Chaim Mivolozhin already says it's not on this medrash, but the medrash is a makor to him. I think there's a place where Reb Chaim Mivolozhin writes that Mashiach's going to come when you're just sitting, and doing your normal work. I don't know if he writes it or someone else writes it about him, that he was sitting and learning, right? And started preparing a shir for Volozhin in his house, right? And his wife comes running in and says, "Get the Shabbos kapota, Mashiach's here." Right? That's the way the story goes. He's sitting and preparing a shir, and Osik in a shir, and Harving in a shir. Chaim, get the kapota. Mashiach's here. Right? That's the way Mashiach comes, when it's least expected. I'm going to give you another Yesod of Mashiach, but there was the idea of we want Mashiach now is not such a simple idea, according to this medrash, that it's going to work that way. Okay, if we want Mashiach now, we're waiting for him, that doesn't mean he's going to come. It's going to come when we're doing everything that we need to do, right? And we're not doing it because Mashiach. We're doing it because we have our business. And meanwhile, God is going to be creating Mashiach, and it's going to surprise us, right? Not only is he going to surprise us when he comes, but you're going to be surprised who he is. And that's what will go in a little bit later in this parsha. Okay? But that's what Reb Yaakov says over here. Reb Yaakov says that this medrash does answer the question. For some reason, Rashi doesn't quote this medrash. Maybe it's not such a pshat medrash, obviously. Rashi's pshat is more to do with the brothers taking Yehuda down from his status, right? So that fits, maybe in the pshat a little bit more. It fits right after the sale, right? That happened right after the sale. So it took him down from his status. So that's why it fits in. But
What? It's probably also a medrash, what Rashi brings.
What? Is it a medrash? I have a feeling you're right. It is a medrash. Hold on. It is Shmos Rabbah in Shmos and Tanchuma.
Right.
Right? But this is a medrash also in Brachus Rabbah also. Right? And Reb Yaakov, for some reason, he doesn't quote that, but he quotes this one. I have a feeling we're going to be able to answer it up why. But Reb Yaakov doesn't clearly answer up, but we'll be able to answer up with Reb Yaakov. There's still a problem here. This story is so long, right? It's basically 30 psukim, right? Kol Maisa Erva Onan, Tamar v'Yehuda, Ladis Peretz v'Zerach, Beprote Protim in Harbe She'elot. It's very, very intimate and intricate, right? And with a lot of questions. There has to be something to learn from the story itself. It can't be just to tell us about Mashiach, that God's creating Mashiach. There's something about the story itself. Now, it may actually tell us something about Mashiach, the story itself, but Reb Yaakov refuses to say that it was all written just to tell me that God's creating the Orush al Mashiach. There's something in the story itself that'll need a hesper. She'ela Aleph. Ma kavanas hapasik vayeda onan ki lo yehazera. When after Er dies, right? In other words, Er is married to Er is the oldest son of Yehuda, and he gets married to Tamar, and he dies, right? It says God kills him, right? Then comes Onan, right? And he's supposed to Keilu do like a Yivum. I think that's the lashon of the pasuk over there. Here. Right? He's going to do the Yivum because he's a brother. So he knew that it says that lo yiyeh hazera, to him the child won't belong to him. So Rabbi Yaakov says el lemi choshev hazera im lo. Who will it be to who will it be if not to him? So you'll say it'll be to who? To Yehuda, a child. What's the point of that? She'ela bet kol aricha shaleidas hatomim, right? like it says, Vayihi belidito vayitem yad, right? The baby pulled out his hand, right? Zerach, vatikach hamiyaledet vatikshar al yado shani leimar ze yetze rishona. She puts that, I guess the red bendel, we call it, right? The red band that they give out at Kevarachel, right? She puts the red band on, purple band on, depends what shani is, right? On Zerach. Vayikameshav yoda v'yinei yatzach achiv v'toma ma paratzta lecha peretz v'yikra shmo peretz v'achar yatza achiv v'yikra shmo Zerach. Right? Ma hachashivas being there. It's like a whole long story, right? It's when they were born, right? There was really twins, she found out, and as soon as the child pulls out his hand, she wraps the thing around to know who's the older twin, which it's not so really important to know who the older twin is, right? What's so important, right? I mean, today it's
it might be the Bechor.
What? What does that mean? So what?
He'd be the Bechor.
Bechor of what? He's child number 4 to Yehuda. He's child number 4, and right, and Zerach is number 5. We have still Sheila alive, number 3, right? So, like, Reb Yaakov wants to know, like, Mach Shivs V'Yizeh V'Gam Tamu B'Shvil Ba Be'emes HaMayeled Kashra Lo Chut Shani Lema Zeh Yatza Rishon Arei Kfar Hayel Yehuda Ben Bechor V'Af Shemeis Harei Nishar Adayin Sheila. Sheila's still here. V'Imkei Lo Peretz Lo Zerach You Rashis O No Shel Yehuda L'Bechora. They won't be the first ones, right? Umay Nafkamina L'Miyaledet Miya ben Adalet u'miya hey. Gam mitzida shel Tamar shayotzi rishon hu peter rachma, right? He is the peter rechem. He's the bechor, like Wayne said, right? Ein b'zeh shum nafkamina l'fnei sheniskachu pitrei rechem b'yitzias Mitzrayim, right? When did this all happen? That there's a concept of bechor, that you po the bechor. That's a Mitzrayim, man. And you're gonna have to say that. The others were Makayim, Pidin Aben, even before the Torah, like you have to give a firm answer over here, right? They were Makayim in the midst, but it's even stranger because there's a Siba over there for it. Bris Milah, we want to be a Jew, but there's a Siba because he killed all the Bechorim in Mitzrayim, right? So there's a Siba, that Siba is not Shaykh here yet. So you're putting a red band around his hand, around Zerach's hand, because you think he's going to be the firstborn. Like, what's exactly going on over here? V'nira Loma, okay? It seems to say excuse me. Let's skip this. I ended over here, and let's go on to page Shin Samach Zayin. Okay, I underlined it by the Ramban. Ela dehi now Ramban Kosam shesod hayibam hoy mukubal v'yadu l'avos v'livneim. Okay, there was the sod. The Ramban doesn't know how and why, but the soda Eber, the Ramban says, was there before Matan Torah. Reb Yaakov adds something, okay, that the Ramban doesn't say. Reb Yaakov says it by himself. All the Ramban says is that families would be miyabim, okay? He doesn't say who in the family. Anyone in the family that could be miyaben is miyaben. Shachoten lokechet takala. Oh, excuse me. V'nira she'az ikar yibum hayi miskayim al yidei shachoten lokechet takala acharei mot bino. The choten, the father-in-law, marries the daughter-in-law after the death of his son, the one who was married to, in this case, to Tamar. Va'ben arishon asher teleid hu yokam al shem achiv hameis, and the first child that is born, right, that he'll stand up on the name of the brother of the brother of the dead one, right? In other words, he will be, instead of the his brother, the one that died, because he is a brother to the one that died. He's born from Yehuda, right? So he will be instead of that brother. Now that makes sense why Yehuda would marry her, because Yehuda lost the child, right? And he's going to bring back the child, right? The child that he lost. With the brother didn't lose a child when he marries the sister-in-law, right? But here it makes sense. So Reb Yaakov says, I want to prove to you that this was the case, that the father-in-law was supposed to, and I'm going to prove it from the parsha. One second. Let's skip over to the bottom. You see where I underlined the 3 lines before the bottom. V'nira shezap pshat b'pasuk vayaker Yehuda vayomer stotka mimeni, and Yehuda recognized her and said, she's more righteous than me. Ki al kain lo natatia l'Shela b'ni. Right? Therefore, I didn't give it to Shela, my son. Now, look what Reb Yaakov says over here. She Yehuda haya bailam al Tamar, ki olav liyab moto. The bailam on Tamar, the one who, so to speak, owned Tamar in Hilchas Kedushin, was Yehuda. He was supposed to be Abed. For who anote nota lechem mibanav bimkomo. And if he doesn't want to marry her, he gives to one of his children. Okay? Now, what is Reb Yaakov saying over here? If you look at the story, right? If you go back to the story on page 3, right? The story is, of course, that Tamar dresses up as a prostitute, right? When does she do that? Okay, so let's take a look. It says, what?
Only when she sees that he's not giving her to a son who's old enough to marry her.
Oh, that's what. But there's another thing that the Torah tells us that we don't know why. Okay, take a look. It says like this. Here. Where's the parsha? The beginning of the parsha. Yeah. Here. Yehuda says, what does Yehuda say? He says to her, after Onan dies, right? He says, go back to your home, right? This is Pasuk Yudid Aleph. Vayomer Yehuda leTamar kalato. Says, Shvi almana beiti avich ad yigdal Shela b'ni, right? Until Shela, my son, grows up. Ki amar penya mut gamu ke'achav, right? Because he said, he doesn't mean he said this to her, right? He said to himself, maybe he'll also die, because I have already 2 children that died. And this is exactly what Wayne said. She's waiting. Well, what is that going on here? Why is that important? Right? Why is it important that Shua dies? Vayinochem Yehuda vayal al goze tzon hu v'chira re'ehu al dulamit timnasa. Vayogad letomar lemar hine chamia ola timnasa lagoze tzono. So Wayne is right. She's not getting Shelah, but for some reason the Torah first tells us that she decided to go to dress up prostitute when he's gozeh son after his wife dies. Okay? And Reb Yaakov is going to explain what's going on over here. Okay. So 1 second. Yeah. So let's go down to the bottom. Okay? In the bottom it says, right? It says at the bottom, Umeyata nivaer et aparsha shel Yehuda v'Tamar. Now we're going to explain everything. Yehuda zeh shebe'etzem hayitzorch liyabem et Tamar. The father-in-law was supposed to do it. El mishum shayin nosui lebat Shua lo ratza lekachet isha nosefet al ishto. He didn't want to take another wife. Ki kein hayagam lifnei cher Rabbeinu Gershon eitz lanoshim. I think it should be miromim. I don't know, moromim. I don't think so. Miromim. Me'am shelo lakhu yosem meisha achat. Okay, even before Rabbeinu Gershon, he wants to give you a yesod here that the elitists, the elites of the Jewish people never took 2 wives. Chutz mimalachim shemitzad malchus yesh lamelch lakachet noshim. It's a din in malchus that he takes other wives, Rabbi Yaakov doesn't explain it here. I think somewhere else he does explain it. Well, we won't go into it right now. Rak mishum korach umishum siba miyuchedes motzaim etzel ha'avos shenosu isha nosefes ukagon elkanah shenosu shtei nashim ki chana hayta akara. Right? Why did he marry Penina? Because it says Chana was an akara, right? And in other words, and of course the avos, Reb Yaakov doesn't say it here, but I remember when he told me the piece, he said Avram. How many wives? One. Then he marries Hagar. Why? Sarah tells him, right? She gives him a second Pilegish, right? Yitzchak, how many wives? One. Even though she can't get pregnant so easily. One wife. Yaakov, Rachel. But what happens is he wakes up in the morning, it's not Rachel, right? So now he's stuck. Is he going to not marry Rachel? He can't not do that. He's in love with Rachel. Is he going to throw away Leah, chas v'shalom? So he marries two. And then they give him, to compete in the race, they give him the two maid servants they give him. But never do the others run around marrying two wives. And now Reb Yaakov adds, lo matzinu, v'kamoke lo matzinu bein atanoim ha'amoraim sheyu nesun liyosem isha achat. You don't find in all of Shas Bavli or Shalmi that one Tana and Amor is married to more than one wife. What's going on over here? There's no Chaim Rabbeinu Gershon in the period of Tanaim and Amoraim. Okay, Yehuda Masaret Tamar Onan, right? Shehu Yibem Bimkomo. That's why he gave it to Onan, because he didn't want to marry two wives. It's not like he has to marry her. He's the first one to marry the father-in-law. If he doesn't, then the next in line. So that was the brother. V'hine b'gmar b'ksuvas. Among Ksufas it says, Daf Kuf Gimel Amid Aleph Darshin Al Pasuk Kabeda Savich Vesimecha Vav Yisrael Rabbas Esachicha Gadol Ayin Sham. It comes to tell me that you have to have covered for your older brother. I know that's not so easy for us, but you have to have covered for your older brother. Ulam the Sefer HaMitzvos LaRambam Mevi Adrosha Bofen Acher Bezelashon Amru Kabeda Savicha LaRabbas Esachicha Gadol. Right on Kabeda Savicha itself. Right, not the vav of the s. Esavicha l'rabas achicha gedol. V'od amru esavicha l'rabas bal imecha. Avicha is also to tell us that even if he's the husband of your mother, k'moshe amru es Hashem l'kecha tir l'rabas talmid chachamim. Dahainu shekvod achicha gedol hu harchava shel kvod ha'av. According to this limud, it's telling you included in Kabeda Savicha, not an extra vav, including Kabeda Savicha, is achicha. Why? Because it's a harchava. Rashi, Reb Yaakov says harchava shel kvod ha'av. V'chein mefurish b'Rambam hilchas maimrim umidivrei sofrim. Listen to this: sheyir adam chayev b'chvod achiv hagadol kichvod aviv. The Rambam says something new over there. He's chayev in his brother like the covet of his father. Zosomer she'aben hagadol memale hamakom shel ha'av nechlal b'kibbud av. Okay, v'lachein zchuyas rabbas is yachadu leben ha'bachar. Now we understand why the ben ha'bachar gets so many zchuyot, because he's in place of the father, not because he's the firstborn and he has, he's got the firstborn. So I was born first. No, he's in place of the father. Okay. Who mekabel at the brachos? Kamo Esav Yaakov. Who amamshech es shosheles hamelucha, right? The oldest son. O anhoga acharei av, right? Ve'im ein ben bachar, az haben hagadol b'yoser. Who hagadol sheba'achim zakoi l'chol zchuyot halolu. In other words, since he's taking the place of the father, therefore he has all these zchuyot. That's why he gets double. That's why he gets the malchus, the bachar, not because he's just the first one. That's the yesod of the Rambam is the reason that he is a broader idea of the father. Okay, he's instead of the father, but the father, he is the father. And therefore, the oldest son was the one who had the obligation. The father says, I don't want to do it. Who do you give it to? Now, according to halacha, any child could be miyabem. The Mishnah says in Yevamas, right, that if a younger brother goes and he sleeps with the Yevama, it works. Even though it was an older brother, he should have waited. But the yesod over here is that if the father doesn't want to do it, then the brother, who should do it? The oldest brother. Why? Because he's instead of the father. In all halachas, he becomes the father. And here was Onan's Nisayim. They love over kol haschuya shel hamamshich love. He is now the bechor because his oldest brother died. V'lachein gam panei love Yehuda liyabein. He says, you're the next one in line. Now you have to do it. Avalim hayam yabein et Tamar. Ozi avlad shivalei sheyeh b'mkom hanifter yafach liyas habechor shel Yehuda. Now, what is the son going to be that's born from Onan? He's instead of the original son that died, right? So he's going to now become the bechor. That's the whole concept of Yivum. That now he becomes that brother, that son that died, right? So that brother that died, that son that died, right? He becomes that person. And Onan, who was going to get all the brachas and malchus and everything, he's going to lose it all because he's bringing a child that's in place of his older brother. Onan ki lo yehazara shehu omed lafsid et kol malas ki godel achim. He knew that to him, this is not going to be. It's not going to be a child of his. It's going to be a child of Yehuda. It's going to be the bechor. V'kasher Onan lo amad ben Esayim v'yimiseu Hashem. Right? God killed him because he was no amad ben Esayim because he ejaculated outside the woman, outside Tamar. Mida keneged mida mikivan shu ratzol l'shmor et hashosheles la'atzmo nena shenichat. In other words, because he wanted to leave the greatness, the shalshelis of greatness for himself, dafka mida keneged mida, he was forgotten. He was lost. V'ine l'bsof kasher Yehuda yibem et Tamar v'ine tumim b'bitna yesh ladat mi ha'bechor. Now you have to know who the bechor is because he's going to be the bechor. So now you have to know, is it going to be Zerach or Peretz who's coming out first? Now it makes perfect sense why she's looking to put the red band. Right? It seems crazy. Who's going to be 4 and 5? I have to know who's older. Like my Rivka is 3 minutes older than Chama. You got to know who's older. And if I don't know who's older, their birthdays on the same day. Believe me. Right?
What's changed? What's changed now? What didn't we know before that we know now to make it?
In other words, Reb Yaakov is proving from this story that Peretz is becoming the bechor to Yehuda. That's why the Miyaledet has to put the armband around him, right? Yesh ladat miu bechor sheken hu yakim al shem niftar er bechor abanim. He's going to become the bechor. V'hu sheyam shechet shosheles al kein kashra miyaledet shani al hayad lemar zeitzer rishena ki chashva shehu yiyem komer. That makes sense now. Why is she so worried? Who should be the first? Because it's not 4 and 5. He becomes number 1. He's instead of his oldest brother, heir.
Well, wait a second. But Sheila is still alive.
It doesn't matter. In other words, the child that's being produced here is being produced because of heir, right? In other words, Yibum, right, is because of heir dying, correct? Heir died without children. So now Onanga. So it's because of heir this Yibum is coming. Oh, so you have to replace heir. Oh, if heir is replaced, Onan is saying, I lose all the covenant. Because I'm fine. And the heir's not here. I'm going to get everything. I'm going to get the brachas. I'm going to get the bechorah, right? So he said, oh, so then he's right for not wanting to do it. But I'm sorry, that's an assignment. So you lose it, but you're obligated to do this concept of yibum, right? So then he doesn't do it, so he died. So now when now Yehuda does it, right? Right? Now I think I did skip one thing. Hold on one second. Yeah. Go back to page Samach Shin Samach Zayin. Okay. And Reb Yaakov's going to learn up a very interesting thing here, and you have to be very meduyak here, because if you look at Chumash, I think the author made a mistake. Maybe next week I'll point it out to you, but if you look at Chumash, I think the author, the way he wrote it up there, what he thinks Pshat is in Reb Yaakov, it's wrong. Okay, but I want to just show you something. At the end, right, it says like this. End of Shin Samach Zayin. Venira, Rabbi Yaakov says, Shezeh pshat b'pasuk vayaker Yehuda vayomer tzadka mimeni. When Yehuda finds out who she is, he says, tzadka mimeni ki al kein lo netatiya l'sheila b'ni. Because therefore I didn't give her the sheila b'ni. She Yehuda haya bailam al Tamar, right? Now this is very strange. Why didn't he give the child, the Tamar, to sheila b'ni? Why? It says in the text.
He was
right?
afraid that she was going to get him getting killed also.
Getting killed also. So what is he saying over here? Ki al kain, right? Ki al kain lo natia l'sheilu b'nei. As if he's saying, I didn't give her the sheilu b'nei because I'm going to marry her. I'm going to marry her. I was supposed to marry her. That's why I didn't give it. That's what the author of Chumash writes. But that's not pshat. I remember what Reb Yaakov said. Okay? Reb Yaakov said like this. He said, al kain over here means it's because I didn't give it to Sheilu B'ni, right? He said, if you look at it, the Lashon, Ki al kain lo natati el Sheilu B'ni. On this that I didn't give her the Sheilu B'ni, she understood that she has to seduce me. Since I'm not giving her the Sheilu B'ni, right? And my wife died, she waited for that. So now he's a single man. So I can marry him. And he's supposed to really marry me, but he keeps giving me to his children. But he's not giving me to his children. And now he's allowed to marry me because he doesn't have any wives. So of course, that's what it means. Therefore, I didn't give it because I didn't give it to Sheilu B'ni. She knows, right? Whatever the reason is, she may not have known the reason. She just knew, like Wayne said, he keeps putting it off, right? So as long as his wife was alive, she didn't do anything. Once his wife died, he knew. She knew that she could do something over here already. And that's the pshat over here, that because it's really the father-in-law that's supposed to do it, he says, Tzadka mimeni, right? She's more righteous than me because she did it the right way. Right? That's the pshat. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll take it up next week, just the end piece. Okay, guys?